It was a cold, relentless night in the forgotten town of Millstone. The kind of night where even the streetlights seemed too tired to shine. Inside a tiny flower shop, tucked between abandoned storefronts, Naomi Reed sat alone. Stacks of unpaid bills cluttered the counter. The scent of wilting roses filled the heavy, silent air. She was just about to close for the night when she caught a glimpse through the rain-streaked window. A boy, no older than 10, sat hunched in a battered wheelchair. His clothes were soaked, hair matted to his forehead, shivering violently against the biting wind. Without a second thought, Naomi rushed to the door, throwing it open against the storm. "Come inside, baby," she called out, voice trembling with urgency. "You're freezing." Inside the flower shop, the storm's fury faded into a muffled roar against the thick glass. The warmth from a flickering space heater wrapped the room like a fragile cocoon. Naomi hurried to fetch an old knitted blanket, worn but soft, and gently draped it over the boy's trembling shoulders. He flinched at first, then slowly, quietly, pulled the fabric closer around himself. No questions, no demands, just kindness, offered freely. Naomi disappeared into the tiny back room and returned with a chipped mug, steam curling from its rim. "Here you go, sweetheart," she said softly, handing him a cup of hot cocoa. His small hands wrapped around it, like he was holding something sacred. Minutes passed, in comfortable silence. Then, Naomi moved to a nearby display, picking a small, yellow daisy from a worn ceramic vase. She knelt beside him, held it out carefully, and whispered, "Daisy mean new beginnings." The boy Leo stared at the simple flower with wide, glassy eyes, as if she had just handed him something magical, something he hadn't known he was desperate for, until now. Leo came back the very next morning, long before the shops around them woke up, long before the first city bus rumbled down the cracked streets of Millstone. Naomi found him waiting quietly by the door, wrapped in that same old blanket she'd given him, rain dripping from the wheels of his chair. She smiled, unlatched the door, and let him in. No words were needed. Day after day, it became their unspoken ritual. Sometimes he'd arrive soaked, teeth chattering. Other times, he'd sit by the window, tracing patterns in the condensation with his finger, waiting simply to belong. Naomi, patient as ever, began teaching him what each flower meant. She would pick a delicate snapdragon, pressing it gently into his hand. "Snapdragons stand for strength," she explained, her voice soft but steady. "Not the kind you see, the kind you carry inside." Leo would nod, soaking in every word like it was treasure. One rainy afternoon, Naomi placed a lilac in front of him, its scent thick and sweet. "Lilacs mean memories," she whispered. "The ones that stay with us, even when everything else fades." Slowly, gently, something inside Leo began to shift. His voice, once little more than a whisper, grew a bit louder, a bit steadier. His smiles, once shy and fleeting, started lingering a little longer. Then came the day Naomi handed him a few stems, some clumsy scissors, and a chipped mason jar. "Go on," she said with a wink. "Make something of your own." Leo's hands fumbled at first, arranging flowers in awkward angles, stems leaning every which way. But when he finally set the jar down, his very first bouquet, his entire face lit up. Pride, joy, something he hadn't worn in a very long time. And Naomi, standing quietly behind the counter, smiled wider than she had in months. Because sometimes growth doesn't roar. Sometimes it just quietly blooms. The weight of the world seemed to settle heavily on Naomi's shoulders as she sat in the dimly lit back office of her small shop. The stack of unpaid bills on her desk grew higher with each passing day. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pretending everything was fine. The shop that had been her dream was slowly slipping away, and all the kindness in the world couldn't change that. She glanced at the clock. It was late. The faint sound of the doorbell jingled as it opened, breaking the silence. Leo, her young son, stepped inside, his small face full of worry. With a whisper, almost as if he didn't want to disturb the quiet sadness in the room, he asked, "Is the shop going to close?" Naomi's heart tightened at the question. She stood up, her fingers brushing over the bills as though they might somehow provide the answers. Slowly, she turned to face him. Her voice was soft but heavy, laced with a sorrow she couldn't hide. "Maybe, baby. Kindness doesn't pay the bills." The silence that followed was deafening. Leo's small body seemed to deflate, his wide eyes filled with confusion and sadness. Without a word, he turned and walked out of the room, his footsteps echoing in the quiet shop. Naomi watched him leave, feeling her heart break with every step he took. As the door clicked shut behind him, Naomi sank back into her chair, her mind racing. How much longer could she hold on? Was this really the end? 2 days passed since the heartbreaking conversation, and Naomi had tried to carry on as best as she could. The flower shop, once a place filled with warmth and hope, now felt like a sinking ship, each passing day inching closer to its inevitable end. But just as she was about to close for the night, a firm, serious knock echoed through the quiet shop. It was unexpected, almost unnerving. She hesitated before walking toward the door, her heart racing. Who could it be at this hour? She opened it cautiously, her eyes meeting the sharp figure of a tall man standing in the doorway. He was impeccably dressed, a tailored suit that screamed wealth and power. His presence was commanding, yet there was something unsettling about him. "I'm Adrian Hale," he said, his voice smooth and deliberate. "Leo's father." Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Leo's father? She hadn't heard a word about him. And yet here he was, standing before her, exuding an air of authority. The revelation that followed would shake her to the core. "Leo," Adrian continued, his eyes softening for a brief moment, "isn't just any boy. He's the son of a billionaire." Naomi's mind spun. She looked at Adrian, then down at the floor, trying to process the information. How could she have never known? But Adrian wasn't done. "You gave him something no therapy ever could hope." The words hit Naomi like a tidal wave. She felt her knees weaken, and for a moment, she wasn't sure if she could stay standing. A simple, small act of kindness, something she'd done without a second thought, had changed Leo's life, and now it was changing hers in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The air between Naomi and Adrian grew heavy with unspoken words. Adrian stepped forward, his hand reaching into the inside pocket of his perfectly tailored suit. Slowly, he pulled out a thick check, folding it once before handing it to her. Naomi's eyes widened as she glanced at the numbers written on the check, an amount that could easily save the shop, keep it running for years, and wipe away the mountain of debt she'd been drowning in. Her heart skipped a beat. The temptation was strong, but something inside her refused to take the easy way out. She shook her head, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed the check back toward him. "I can't accept this," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I've built this shop with my own 2 hands. I'm not looking for charity." Adrian's expression softened. There was no anger, no frustration, just quiet respect. He took the check back, carefully tucking it away in his jacket. Naomi's refusal hadn't offended him. In fact, it seemed to have only deepened his admiration. "You're proud," Adrian said, his tone measured, almost approving. "I respect that." He paused, considering his next words carefully. "How about this?" he said, his voice low and deliberate. "You run the shop your way. I'll support you. Quietly. No strings attached. No interference." Naomi looked up at him, her gaze sharp, searching for any sign of a hidden agenda. But Adrian's eyes remained steady, his sincerity clear. She took a deep breath, the weight of the offer settling in. It wasn't what she'd expected, but something about it felt right. This wasn't charity. This was an opportunity to rebuild on her own terms. The days following Adrian's offer were a blur of decisions, discussions, and small changes that slowly began to transform the shop. Naomi had been cautious, unsure whether she could truly trust the partnership he'd proposed. But as she watched Adrian quietly support her efforts, never demanding, never pushing, she found herself beginning to believe in the possibility of a fresh start. It started with the basics. A brand new cooler arrived one morning, sleek and efficient, ready to preserve Naomi's flowers for longer. The fresh inventory, vibrant, bold blooms began to fill the shelves, each petal more beautiful than the last. It wasn't just the shop that was changing. Naomi could feel the atmosphere shift, as though the air itself had grown lighter, filled with a new sense of possibility. But Adrian's support didn't end with the material things. He had an idea that would breathe new life into the shop. After-school flower workshops, Naomi had always dreamed of sharing her passion for flowers with the community, but she'd never had the time or resources to make it happen. Now, she had both. The workshops became an instant hit, drawing in children and adults alike, each one eager to learn about the art of flower arranging. Naomi watched as the students' faces lit up with excitement, their eyes filled with wonder as they carefully crafted their own bouquets. The workshops weren't just about flowers. They were about building connections, fostering creativity, and offering a safe space for people to gather. As the shop's success grew, so did its physical space. The classroom area expanded, now filled with tables and chairs, each one ready for another class. The air was always filled with laughter, and the sound of scissors snipping through stems, as Naomi's dream of creating a community hub came to life before her eyes. Just when it seemed like everything was falling into place, another challenge arose. Naomi had worked tirelessly to keep Bloomfield Blossoms thriving, and the community support was stronger than ever. But, as fate would have it, the city inspector arrived, his expression unreadable. He glanced around the shop, clipboard in hand. "There are zoning concerns," he said matter-of-factly. This space wasn't designed for after-school programs or workshops. Naomi's heart skipped a beat. The workshops, the sense of belonging she had nurtured, were now at risk. It felt like the dream she had built was slipping through her fingers. But the tension didn't stop there. Some neighbors, people she had hoped to connect with, voiced their concerns as well. One of the letters read, "This isn't a daycare," implying that the shop's new activities were disrupting the neighborhood's peace. It was a blow that Naomi hadn't seen coming. Here she was, surrounded by the flowers that had once given her hope, now feeling like a reminder of the uphill battle she was facing. The world felt smaller, and for a moment, she questioned if she could overcome this new setback. But little did Naomi know, this would be the moment that would bring the community even closer together. But then something incredible happened. Word of the city's pushback spread, and soon, the very people Naomi had been serving came to her side. Parents, children, neighbors, they rallied together, pouring their support into the flower shop. They began collecting signatures, 67 in total, each one a testament to the difference Naomi had made in their lives. Letters poured in, each one more heartwarming than the last. "The flower shop is a sanctuary," they said, "a place where our children feel safe, where hope blooms." Naomi stood at the center of it all, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. For the first time in days, a smile tugged at the corners of her lips. The fight wasn't over, and she wasn't alone. The moment Naomi had been waiting for finally arrived. The zoning board's decision was in, and against all odds, Bloomfield Blossoms had been approved as a community center. The joy that flooded Naomi's heart was overwhelming. It was a victory, not just for her, but for everyone who had believed in the shop's potential. The grand reopening ceremony was nothing short of magical. Yellow ribbons adorned every corner of the shop, symbolizing hope, renewal, and the bright future ahead. Naomi stood at the entrance, glowing in a simple yellow dress, a quiet reflection of the journey she had taken to get here. Leo, beaming with pride, stood beside her, ready to cut the ribbon. The crowd gathered, parents and children alike, their faces filled with excitement and anticipation. As the ribbon fell, applause erupted, and the sound of laughter and celebration filled the air. News cameras captured the moment, broadcasting it for the world to see. Naomi stood there, her heart full, as she watched Leo, the little boy who had once worried about the shop's future, now celebrating its bright new beginning. Everything had changed, and everything was possible again. As the sun set, casting a gentle orange glow through the shop's window, the evening was calm. The once bustling flower shop now stood quiet, its shelves filled with the scent of fresh blooms. Naomi stood at the counter, carefully arranging the final touches on a bouquet. A simple blue sunflower bouquet, wrapped with care. Leo stood beside her, his hands fumbling slightly as he tried to tie the ribbon, his cheeks flushed, a soft pink. "It's for my crush," he whispered, his voice full of hope and nervous excitement. Naomi smiled, her eyes warm. She helped him tie the ribbon, offering gentle encouragement. The soft flicker of a candle burned quietly by the window, its light dancing in the evening breeze. The shop was peaceful, as if the world outside had paused for just a moment. On the counter, a single daisy sat in a small vase, a small, humble bloom, but a symbol of everything that had begun here, of how it had all started with a simple act of kindness, a seed planted in the heart of Bloomfield blossoms. Naomi looked at the daisy, a faint smile tugging at her lips. She turned to Leo and said softly, her words carrying a quiet